Hey, hey, hey. It's another episode of Soul Care Conversations with your girl, Maria. So, if you've been rocking with me for a minute, or if you've added me to your podcast playlist over the years, I've done a lot of refining and changing up and switching up my podcast. And I originally was called Self-Care Sundays. And often friends that I met along the way over the years are like, oh, I came by your podcast. So just for clarity, it is now Soul Care Conversations. And why Soul Care Conversations? Because everything that I talk about, hopefully you walk away from the conversation with something that helps you along your journey of feeding your soul. So today's topic is about competition culture. Let's talk about competition culture. Now, I feel like this is another topic, like all of the past couple of topics that I've went over in the past couple of weeks. This topic needs about a part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Why did I say that? Because competition culture, this topic has so many layers. But today I just want to tap into it just a little bit. I know some listeners are listening to this and they're like, what does she mean by competition culture? And then for some people, it sparks something in their mind like, okay, I get what she means by competition culture. Now, there are so many layers to this particular terminology. You could talk about competition culture from a market standpoint, like the science of marketing. You can look at it from the standpoint of the science of how different geographical locations are in terms of like supply and demand. But I'm talking from like a social standpoint. I'm talking about when fellow women who do the same thing can't support each other because they're doing the same thing. They have to feel like, okay, she's doing a podcast, so I have to outdo her. Oh, she has a clothing line, so I have to outdo her. Oh, she's over there got a house, so now I got to get a bigger house. Oh, she over there has a husband, so I got to get me a husband and also a husband and 2 husbands sometimes. So basically what I'm saying is that competition culture that we see every day, that's influenced by social media, that's influenced by just something inside of us. You know, there are so many ways that someone can view that term. But the term and analogy that I'm using for it is when we live in a society, it seems like where not everyone, but most people seem like they have to one up the next person in order to feel good about themselves. I give you an example. I have never really considered myself to be a super competitive person, but however, I always have these situations where I have made friends with people that see me as competition and I see them as my, inspiration. I see them as somebody that I want to, break bread with, but also learn with and learn from. I've been in situations where God kept me hidden so that way he can give me certain opportunities that wasn't around the wrong people. Because I've been around the wrong people where I was really on my way to like advancing my career, and I let certain people into a very crucial part of my journey, and it really was my downfall. You have to be able to identify the people around you who don't just see you as competition, but they see you as an ally. Competition culture. What do I mean by competition culture? It's when your friends will scroll past your small business but they will be in the comments of a celebrity like Beyonce and all these other, celebrities that don't even know they exist. And they're willing to risk it all to get to their concert, or risk it all to buy their new perfume or their new, clothing line. But when you have a clothing line, because it's too close to familiarity for some people, they can't support you. There's many times where I feel like I've been affected by competition culture. There's been times where I would say to, someone, hey, I want to collaborate with you. I really think what you're doing is amazing. And sometimes people can't even receive something that high level of positivity because they're already expecting you to want to compete with them. Right? So, right now I'm transitioning right now. I'm a new mom and I'm transparent about that. You probably even heard a podcast episode where my baby was a part of the conversation, because this is my reality. And I'm thankful that there are people who can relate to that. I'm thankful that I have built an audience of women that can relate to that reality that, hey, that girl is not going to let anything stop her. Competition culture is when you're working in a corporate environment, and because you are a woman that just had a child, people count you out and people try to take your spot. That has happened to me at a professional level and so many other levels. When you have a baby, people automatically assume that life is going to slow you down. And guess what, honey? It could definitely slow you down if you don't find a way to make time for self-care, make time to find balance. And it's very hard to find the balance. I'm still learning how to find the balance. But I said, if I'm only in a race with myself, it's no need for me to feel like I have to rush my life. I'm going to say that again. If I'm only in a race with myself, then there is no competition to win, right? The only competition I'm winning is me versus the old me. And some people, and I see it every day, they feel like in order to feel important or good about themselves, they have to outdo the next person. And they automatically feel that the person that's doing the same thing as them has to be competition. When in reality, that's not the case. I know that God filled my cup up, and He filled my cup up to the brim. So that way, when I pour into others, my cup continues to run it over. So that means that when God filled my cup, I started my podcasting journey in 2020. I had wanted to do it much sooner, but I just had so many career obligations where I didn't know how to find time or make time to do what I really had in my heart to do. I've been exposed to working on the radio since I was 14 years old. That's another story that I want to get into for another podcast episode. But, I've always had the desire to use my voice in my story to hopefully inspire someone else. But the toxicity of competition culture had discouraged me at one point, because I consider myself a very open-hearted person. My heart is so open. And if you really know me, you know that, nobody's perfect. Absolutely not. We all fall short of perfection. However, I have a very pure heart. And anyone that I care about, I want them to succeed. I always want to lift while I'm climbing, right? And I got into an environment around the wrong people that they saw my light. They saw who I am. They saw what I represent. Or maybe they misunderstood what I represented. And they tried to bring me down. They tried to undermine my success. And oh my goodness. And I couldn't understand it because I can't fathom seeing someone else with a jealous mindset, because I'm not a jealous person. When I see someone who got a banging body, oh my gosh, I'm over here with the postpartum still looking good, but I have a postpartum body, right? And that means whatever it means to any woman. Every woman's body is different. But I'm looking at the woman with the snatched up body, waist gone, whatever. I look at them and be like, wow, she looks amazing. And I'm inspired by her being able to wake up, go lift those weights at 5 a.m. I'm inspired, but I'm not intimidated or jealous. And I think the root of a lot of competition culture is insecurity within self and the feeling of needing that we all kind of adopted. Some people say the Jim Crow letter, the Willie Lynch letter is a myth. I don't know any of my listeners that are familiar with the Willie Lynch letter, but especially amongst Black women, we sometimes have the tendency to see each other as competition. You can see it in No Limit of Time in the hip-hop industry. I love the fact that there are some new hip-hop artists out there that are saying, you know what, sis, get on, let's do a feature together. You popping, I'm popping, let's get popping. There are some artists out there that I look at, I'm like, okay, you guys are all about women empowerment. But you can also see there is this little competition culture where it feels like hip-hop has to pin women against each other. In order, but when it comes to men, every men have their own lane. That's why I focus so much on women empowerment, because there is layers to the social engineering that has taken place amongst society that has put women in this frenzy. And if you really understand the history of a lot of things, you will realize that sexism is alive and well. Unfortunately, it is. There is layers to the patriarchy that some of us don't even identify that we have been affected by. And a lot of that also ties into competition culture. There is evolutionary psychology that dives into the psychological explanation for why a lot of women compete with each other. And sometimes it's rooted in the need for a certain man's attention, or in the eyesight of men, or the male gaze, or sometimes it's just rooted in a lot of insecurity and jealousy, right? And then, let me also say, it's nothing wrong with healthy competition. Sometimes it's needed in certain environments to help people strive beyond what they thought was possible for themselves, especially, in school, and, you got chess competition, and, science fair competition. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the toxic competition culture that exists in certain realms. Like, the areas where we as women could be empowering each other, but instead we look for opportunities to tear each other down or judge the next woman. Like, for me, that's why I'm all about inclusion. You don't have to have the same religion as me in order for me to respect you. You don't have to have the same point of view as me for me to respect you and uplift you and see the beauty in you. There are some women that they're snobby, right? And they're snobby to the point where they feel like they have to ostracize other women who do not align with them. And you always see that, like the movie Mean Girl. One girl thought she was the top, the top of the top. On Wednesdays, we wear pink head honcho. And then she saw this new girl who had something very unique about her. And she wanted to manipulate this sweet girl to kind of like be socially engineered to be like her. when she saw that this girl was not only becoming like her, but also adopted her toxicity to the point where she was worse than her, right? And that's something you look at in a lot of different scenarios. But this is just part one, about competition culture, because I just really want to dive into this topic. And I want to bring some of my homegirls on here. If you have seen my self-care page, if you have seen some of my vlogs in 2020, you know that I'm all about collaborating with other women. And the only reason why I haven't been able to collaborate with a lot of amazing women that I am friends with is because I'm in a transition of moving. I'm in a transition of upgrading a lot of things in my life. God has been really blessing me privately, while I've also been going through some really hard health related trials as well. But it's really been on my spirit for about 3 months now to start on this topic of competition culture, because it pains me. It's painful to know that there are women who just cannot be in their light without feeling like they have to tear another woman down. And I know what it feels like to be teared down by other women. I know what it feels like to think I'm friends with someone, but they're gossiping about me. And I want to talk about that, the gossiping, the toxicity of gossiping. I was randomly scrolling down my timeline on one of my social handles, and this woman was like, gossip is one of the oldest forms of witchcraft. And when you gossip about somebody, and when it's like a group of people gossiping about you, it's almost as if, the way this woman explained it, I'm just paraphrasing what she said, it's almost as if they're trying to cast a spell on you to bring you down, and that is something that we live in a very gossip-centered society. The tabloids, the news is very gossipy to me, right? And it's just like, how do you create your own lane without feeling the need to compete with another woman or tear another woman down or tear another person down? Because it's not just a toxicity amongst women, it's a toxicity towards men, amongst men as well. We see it in so many different examples of that all the time. Like, for example, Soulja Boy. I don't know if anybody saw, any of my listeners saw where Soulja Boy kind of lost his mind because J. Cole did an interview, and in the interview he was talking about how there was a time in his journey as a hip-hop artist where he felt like he wanted this type of genre of rap, and he didn't understand the genre of rap with Soulja Boy. But then he came to a realization that rappers like Soulja Boy during that time were the people who were moving the culture of hip-hop, who had their own wave. But that's why communication and interpretation is so important, to really analyze. Sometimes in a misunderstanding, you will find out how a person can only hear you through a certain filter that they created in their mind about you, right? But that's a whole nother topic for another day too. But that is an example of competition culture, where this hip-hop artist, J. Cole couldn't just be his genre without, and this person can't just have their genre without everything being who was the best, who was on top, and it brings me back to the Willie Lynch letter, where it was just like, it was basically a letter that this particular slave owner wrote that said, ways to keep one black person against the other black person. And I think it's so important that, yes, if you're a spiritual person, yes, I'm so locked in with God and my spiritual journey, like I talked about in a previous podcast. I'm a very spiritual person. From a very little girl, I was always locked in with my spirituality. However, with your spirituality, you need to also, in my opinion, right, get into the science and the history of things and why the world is the way it is. Many of us could really benefit from really getting down to the science of a lot of things that's going on around us. There's a root cause for everything. There's a root cause for everything. And it's so important to really, understand, dive into this topic about competition culture, because many of us, I look at a lot of these women that are kind of so engulfed in feeling like they got to compete with the next woman. It's a lot of times also it's to prove a point. I got to prove that I'm such and such, and I got to prove that I'm this. It's so many layers to it, but I want to leave this episode with some key points. The number one point is, when you identify someone around you is competing with you, right? What do you do? What do you do? I think the number one thing you need to do is pray for them, right? Pray for them that they find a certain sense of peace within themselves, right? That they don't feel the need to be on this unnecessary competition with someone else, right? That everyone has a unique mission. And sometimes their unique mission could be similar to yours, but it's not the same. So it's impossible to compete with me because there's only one me, right? There's only one me and there's only one you. So when you see another woman and you feel like I got to outdo them, and I'm not one of them people that's going to be on here saying, oh, this is the best podcast in the world, because that's not what I'm doing this for. There are over 7 billion people in the world. And there are so many listeners on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on Apple Podcasts. I don't have to be the best, right? I can be one of the best. I can be one of the greatest, I guess. But I don't thrive off of feeling I got to be better than the next woman. I just know that I have a voice. And my intentions for this podcast is to really inspire people, not to make myself look important, not to make myself look better than other people, but to really inspire. And I'm definitely going to be on YouTube soon. It's just, I want to get my new space in order, my new, next level that God has blessed me with in order, so I can get back to it, but if you don't know, I am on YouTube. I've actually been on YouTube for years. I'm not an expert videographer yet, right? And I'm not expert in a lot of things, but I keep trying and I keep going, because my only competition is myself. And that's my next point, right? It's important to know that you don't have to compare yourself to the next woman. You don't have to, in order to feel worthy. There is your own particular unique journey that God has blessed you with, and you have to keep faith in that, right? And it's okay to cheer another woman on that's doing the same thing as you. And I think it's so heartbreaking when I cheer on other women and they're so not used to it that they think they misinterpret it as being fake. There are some women that are so used to the negative energy that a lot of women spew to each other, that they can't take it, right? And I've never been a mean girl ever in my life, right? I mean, I've had times when I had to tell people off. Like, there is no woman that is speaking on a podcast, that is speaking on a platform, that's just been perfect their whole life. No way. No way. Nobody has a perfect life. No one. And I think that's the issue that I have with social media, is that everything is about optics. And sometimes people only put their best foot forward because they think that, let me put what's the sexiest thing to see, right? And we have to get into authentic conversations. That's why on my podcast, it's all about me being authentic as possible, so that way my listeners can consistently connect with me, and so competition culture, I am all about collaborating with other women, and that's not fake, it's not phony. If you know me, that's really what I'm about. There is no woman walking this earth, I don't care if they Beyonce, which I absolutely love artists like Beyonce. I love how she empowers women as much as she possibly can. But of course, she's not perfect. No one's perfect. I don't care who you are. I don't see you as competition because there is only one me, right? And some women, they get into certain sectors and certain avenues and certain corporate spaces, and they feel like they have to undermine the other woman. It's that competition culture because their self-esteem is rooted in feeling better than other people. And it happens all the time, so this is only part 1, and I always say that, right? Because a lot of part 2s to this conversation is going to be on my YouTube channel. So you stay tuned. Thank you for listening this far, and also too, it's an open forum. If you're hearing this podcast, if you're hearing this episode, feel free to check out Self Therapy by Bria _ on Instagram and let me know what you want to hear, right? And, wherever you are, whoever you are, male or female, know that there is something so unique about you. You are an unrepeatable miracle. So there is no reason for you to feel like you have to compete with the next person, right? It's no reason for you to feel like I have to outdo the next person in order to feel worthy. Because you're worthy. Being worthy is a birthright, right? And I just want every woman and every little girl that I ever meet to ever know that they don't have to compare themselves. We really have to kill the competition culture. But that's my 2 cents on this topic. Thank you for listening and tuning in to another Soul Care conversation.